I've been cleaning out the garage and it's been warm, so there's a bunch of allergies.
Oh, bummer.
I might have to go and dust, you know what I mean? And then it's been windy, the
Mm-hmm.
usual, the usual March.
Mm-hmm.
I might have to go give the bees some water
The bees.
and the dogs some. Yeah, the bees need water. You have to give them water so they make honey.
Mm.
Everything needs water.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget because during the winter I don't give them water because they aren't out, you know. But
Mm-hmm.
now they're starting to make stuff. So whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I'm testing now, looking at the stream. It looks
Okay.
looks great. Sounds great.
Okay.
Let me do a test though. Let me test the widget. That's what always crashes us.
Okay. I
Let's
know
see.
the widget that tells us that the somebody's following or the alert
Yeah, the
or
alert.
whatever, right?
Let's see if it does it.
And then I'm gonna have to cover my bees up again because like we're supposed to have snow Tuesday and Wednesday are supposed to be cold and snowy on Wednesday, and it's supposed to be cold on Tuesday. I don't know. It's just
Hmm.
crazy.
I don't think it did it.
So you got to build them like a pond, not a pond, but you got to put like rocks in it, or else they'll drown the bees.
Hmm.
When you put their water, when you make them a water trough or whatever you want to call it, you got to put rocks in it so they can crawl on the rocks to get the water,
Mm-hmm.
or otherwise they'll drown, which is not a good thing.
Okay, I think it's working. It didn't crash, so
Okay,
seems like
well,
we're good
good.
to go. Okay, are you outside?
I am.
Okay.
Why does it sound like I'm outside?
I hear a little wind noise, but it's okay. I'm sure I'll have a few more trains drive by any minute now.
It's me walking more than it's windy.
Uh
You know
huh.
what I mean? It's just me walking.
Okay, well,
But I'm going back in. I gave the bees water and I gave the dog water. So,
awesome.
yeah, Matt's supposed to come over and help me with um, the frames on another beehive too, because it's this is the time of year when they swarm. When a queen makes, if she has any queens, this is the time they come
Mm-hmm.
in March, and they'll leave. But it and even if we have a hive, it may not go in there. Did I tell
Mm.
you how much like a colony of bees is?
Mm-mm.
It's like $150
Wow.
to $200. Yeah, and they don't live forever. I mean, I think 4 to 5 years, maybe.
A colony or a
Okay,
hive?
a queen.
Oh, a queen. They don't.
Yeah, a
They don't
queen.
reproduce the queen.
They do, but well, that's when it gets all. That's when the
They go to
nature of
war.
bees gets kind of like other animals, not nice and
Hmm.
gets. They can kill a new queen.
Mm-hmm. Like people, they have a
Hmm.
revolution. I guess that was sort of a segue.
Yeah, sort of.
Professional. Um,
That's right.
yeah. So, speaking of, shall we start off reading the text of our beloved Article 5?
Yes.
The hidden, uh, esoteric part of the Constitution. Go Go the Bear, what's up? Thanks for coming through. You rule. We got Go Go the Bear here. We got 3 viewers at the moment. I'm doing great. How are you, Go Go the Bear? With the squid emoji. Nice. Okay, I'm going to start reading here Article 5. The Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution, or, on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, shall call a convention for proposing amendments, which in either case shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution, when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states, or by conventions in 3/4 thereof, as the one or the other mode of ratification may be proposed by the Congress, provided that no amendment which may be made prior to the year 1808 shall in any manner affect the first and fourth clauses in the 9th section of the first article, and that no state without its consent shall be deprived of its equal here on this reading. Let's see, which no amendment which may be made prior to year 1808 shall in any manner affect the first and fourth clauses in the 9th section of the first article. And then there's a semicolon, and then it continues, and that no state without its consent shall be deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate. So I'm guessing that equal suffrage in the Senate part has nothing to do with the year 1808. So that no state being deprived its equal suffrage in the Senate, I think that's a eternal restriction on the amendments, right? Would you agree with that interpretation?
Yes, that you can't make an amendment that says like Rhode Island can't have its senators.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
I think we can't make that amendment. That's the one amendment you can't make, I guess.
Yeah.
The
Now that's in
Constitution is you can't deprive another state.
now that is
Go
in the
ahead.
Senate, so I guess you could theoretically deprive a state of its equal suffrage in the House, right?
Well, yes.
In theory.
Because, well,
I mean, it would be hard. You'd have to get. I'm guessing that whatever state that was would have to get. They would probably vote against it, and they'd have to get 12 other states to vote against it, or to not vote against it, but just not ratify it. So it would be probably pretty difficult to do that. But
and my guess is that none of the other states are going to ratify it because
yeah, something like that.
it sets too high of a precedent.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be, you know.
Mm-hmm. If anybody's stream like freezes, just refresh the page, because mine froze a second ago, but it seems like refreshing seems to have worked. Okay, let me take
Mine
this.
freezes all the time. So what it means is that even Congress cannot make amendments. They can only propose amendments and have the states ratify it.
Yes.
The same amount of states have to ratify it as for an Article 5. So Congress does not have more power than the people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what the Article 5 tells us.
Yes.
That's what it grants us, I believe. The power of people to be Congress when Congress ceases to work. And I have to tell you, since you and I have been talking about that, like everybody else is talking about how Congress really isn't working. Like, really isn't working. Like, before it wasn't working, but now, and with Mitch McConnell coming up with the, what, scorched earth, and everyone's like, well, we've been there, done that.
Mm-hmm.
You've already, So that's when it's senators are threatening like other senators about if you do something, then this will be the consequence of your action.
Yeah, if they get rid of the
sound
filibuster.
like Congress is. Yeah, but I'm saying that Congress isn't working. Not that I think we should
Mm-hmm.
keep the filibuster, of course, because as you
Right.
know, what I think about that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I believe, but that's for another day.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, one of the things you wanted to talk about the framers, I mean, I'm not an expert on the filibuster, but I believe the framers were against the filibuster. You know, there was writings in the Federalist Papers, at least, saying, you
There
don't
might
want
have
to.
been, but they might, and I don't know that they were all on agreement of that.
Sure.
Madison, Hamilton, and Jay,
Mm-hmm.
um, who also ends up being ambassador to France, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just kind of interesting. We were discussing the timeline of the Constitution of America and the timeline of the French Revolution,
Mm-hmm.
which actually is a lot closer in time than a lot of people may know. Because we don't really get a constitution until 1788, and the French Revolution is in 1789. The ambassador
Mm.
to the France at the time is Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson is not really the author of the Constitution.
No.
James Madison is.
Mm-hmm. The
And
bulk of
he
it.
and the bulk of it, and also it actually getting to be a constitution, is mostly because of
Mm-hmm.
Madison,
Because
and
he.
not all to his credit, I'll say.
Uh-huh.
Well, he did a lot of kind of hanky panky, did a lot of underhanded things. I mean, he didn't even tell some of the people that are supposed to show up
Mm-hmm.
that they were supposed to be there
Mm-hmm.
at the time. Do you know what I mean? He had them come in late.
And the delegates
So
from, wasn't it Rhode Island? The delegates left in protest, right?
I think so. I have to go back and check the names on that. But part
Definitely,
of it is,
definitely one of the
go
states
ahead.
though. All their delegates left
Yes,
in protest because they thought it was.
I think it is Rhode Island.
Uh-huh.
I think it was Rhode Island. Yeah.
So it wasn't a unanimous, and it wasn't a universally agreed upon system. But after the convention, you know, they had this thing in place, and a lot of the um, whatever you want to call them, the high rollers at the time, the insiders, also now known as the framers, they they were all on board, or most of them, enough of them were on board, but they still had to go out and sell it to the citizens, and that's when they wrote the Federalist Papers. And of course, it was like we said last time, Federalist 85, the last one, where Hamilton.
Did I lose you? Did something happen? I just lost you.
It's the strongest argument in favor of the Constitution because Article 5 allows for amendments. And so, if anything, it makes the system where the people are literally in control.
Yes, and you know what? It must have been Alexander Hamilton that did put the Article 5 in, or got Madison to put it in because he was still alive at the time because he doesn't die till 1804.
Mm.
So I don't, Hamilton, without a doubt, was all for the Article 5
Mm-hmm.
because he felt there could be a time when government could quit working.
Mm-hmm.
And then the people would either have, you know, the choice of a revolution or the choice of an Article 5.
Mm-hmm.
amendment to the Constitution. So that's really, and Madison did not want that. I don't think he did not want the Article 5 because
Yeah.
I think I think Madison believed we would return to a monarchy,
Hmm.
if not right then, soon. And when you look at it in the case of history, every I think I will accept Russia, but I'm saying before the 20th century, every country who had like gotten rid of their monarch had brought their monarchs back later.
Mm-hmm.
England with the Civil War, and France after Napoleon put a monarch on. Then they got rid of him. Then they got another Bonaparte. Then they got another. Then they got a mix of Bonaparte and
Hmm.
the French kings, and they put him on. And then they got sick of him too. So
Mm-hmm.
and so I do think that he thought it was a natural course of people to want to turn to a monarchy. I think Madison really thought that. And not because he was, not because that was such a strange thing to think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's all it's all anybody had ever known, basically.
Well, or when they had changed it, then they just ended up going back to it.
Mm-hmm.
Except maybe Switzerland. But Switzerland does, you know, I have my conspiracy theory on Switzerland.
Mm-hmm.
So
What's that? I don't
that's a
know.
different day. That it's founded by the Knights Templar.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not the only one who thinks that.
Hmm.
There are other researchers who've done great research into it, and it is sort of interesting because actually they are the first democracy that we know of, and there's something like 1385 or something. I have to check,
Huh.
but they overthrew the person who was um, he wasn't really the ruling person of them. He wasn't a king. He was just
Mm-hmm.
like a duke or whatever, and people think, oh, well, that's not a big deal. Well, it is a big deal because at that time, farmers didn't know, or people who worked on the land, agrarians, you know,
Mm-hmm.
people, they didn't know how to make weaponry and they didn't even know what went into it. That
Mm-hmm.
wasn't their deal. Do you know what I mean? So the fact that all of a sudden, boom, bam, they have an army and a trained army
Mm-hmm.
in a matter of like 2 years. So this, because this Duke doesn't really hang out in Switzerland. It's like too difficult to get to. So he hangs out in like a part of Germany or France or somewhere. And he goes and checks his stuff every once in a while, right? And gets his money and
Mm-hmm.
all that. So he hears that the peasants are going to revolt, so it takes him like 2 years to get it together to go and after him. And he goes and they beat the crap out of him and he never goes back, and Switzerland never has been conquered
Hmm.
since that time.
And they've been a democracy ever since.
Hmm.
Hmm. I did not
Or
know that.
the most of like a democracy. Do you know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like they did have voting, but
Mm-hmm.
it's, you know, it's not like, but even Greece didn't have a
Yeah, not a
democracy. We
direct
talk about it.
democracy,
Right. I
but
mean,
some.
or not everyone included, that's for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Oh yeah, sure.
Women still couldn't vote in Greece.
Mm-hmm.
Who said they were enlightened?
Mm-hmm. Slow progress, you know. I mean, and the framers, for all their problems, I mean, they obviously weren't saints. You know,
Saints. Saints. I like
they
that.
weren't moral exemplars, but um, they were ahead of their time. I mean,
See,
And
you say that. You believe that. I know you believe that.
I mean, to give up power in any way, I mean, because they could have I mean, they were able to seize power and install the Constitution, so they could have installed basically whatever they wanted and probably sold it to the people. I mean, there was, from what I've heard, there was pushback against the Constitution, and people wanted to keep the Articles of Confederation, um, but they
It's
did it.
an economic. It was an economic situation
Hmm.
that can this the Confederate of States could not enter into legal and binding contracts with other countries because they weren't all cohesive,
Hmm.
and that was both as I read on it, which is that Adams and Jefferson, as you know, had very different ideas on the Treasury, as did Hamilton. But they all knew that America would need to take loans.
Hmm.
They just knew that because we didn't have enough. We were in debt. We didn't have anything. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
The most stupid thing we did was the War of 1812.
Hmm.
I don't know what that was about.
Hmm.
You know, okay, just for all you folks, England was fighting the Napoleonic Wars in 1812.
Hmm.
They had the greatest navy at the time, at
Oh
the
yeah.
time.
Hmm.
So we declare war on them. What were we thinking? Because I don't think we were really a Bonaparte fan either. America as a whole, I don't think really was a Bonaparte fan. Napoleon Bonaparte. Our idea was that we didn't care what happened in.
I still can't hear you.
Are
What
you
happened?
okay?
Oh, there you are. Now you're back.
Is everything okay?
Now you're back.
Oh, I'm back. Did I? I don't know what that was. I'm still just sitting here.
I don't know. Weird.
Anyway, so I think that it is a lot of what was happening around them that made them look at the Article 5
Hmm.
as a way to stand outside of the institutions of, or the normal, I shouldn't say normal, the customary uh, chain of command.
Uh huh. Yeah, I mean, obviously, because, like you said, the French Revolution happened in between our revolution and the
No,
Constitution's.
no after. Well, it kind of starts, but it actually, they
It
go,
was a long time, the French Revolution, right?
it was a long time. I mean,
There was a
there were a
long
lot of things.
gearing up process.
Well, they were even having riots before we started the uh, War of Independence
Hmm.
about the harvest, the grain harvest, and that was part of what sort of happened. But that, the thing about what all historians say and everything that I have read, watched on the French Revolution is that the monarchy of France was just too distant. They were too unaware of
Hmm.
what was really happening.
Hmm.
They had no idea
What?
because,
Hmm. And
go
think
ahead.
about that. That, like, that's such a. It's an exact illustration of why you need a way for the people to communicate to their government, which is exactly what Article 5 allows. The states, people can petition their states to pass a resolution to call for a convention if they're not happy, if they want an amendment, and that's just basically a kick in the behind for Congress to act. And if Congress doesn't act, then it has real teeth, and other states can get behind that call for a convention, and changes can be made with or without Congress. So, I mean, it's if the problems you're seeing around the world are governments being unresponsive to the will of the people, you need to have a section that in your system, a code, a piece of source code that allows for updates. It's the most obvious part. I mean, it seems obvious to us now, but yeah, at the time it was very original. And I think again, the I think there must be some symbolism to the fact that they chose five, the fifth article, to put that there. I mean, they were well versed in numbers and I don't want to say numerology, but symbolism. They were well versed in symbolism, and they knew that uh, the fifth position is a position of significance. And then to make it all one sentence, like literally to make it as simple as possible so that it couldn't be corrupted or misinterpreted. It's not like, the Second Amendment that has weird parts to it. It has the first part about a well regulated militia, and then it has a period,
which we still don't know what that is.
Yeah, and so therefore it's super ambiguous to us now. They made sure Article 5 was like unambiguous.
Tight.
Yeah, tight.
It was tight.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. It's one long run-on sentence,
Yeah.
but it's still tight because you have no doubt what it allows you to do.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure I made a lot of people nervous by bringing up the Second Amendment. I mean, I think there's a case to be made that we should have another amendment that repeals the Second Amendment.
Which we can do because we have amendments that have repealed amendments.
Mm-hmm.
That's the Prohibition Amendments.
I know heads are exploding out there. It's going to be hard for me. I know it's not a great idea to be partisan, but it's going to be hard not to get partisan sometimes,
Well, it's what I was telling you about. If we make an amendment that no longer prohibits the use of cannabis, it is the first step to stopping racism in this country. Mm-hmm. And that's why everyone who doesn't want to be thought of as a racist, everybody doesn't want anybody to think they're a racist, anybody who might be a racist but doesn't want anybody to know, and all the people who aren't racist, we should have an amendment to stop the prohibition of cannabis.
Agreed.
Because it has turned out to be a totally racist
Now here's the
action in this country. Go ahead.
Here's a question of what do you think about this is kind of a two-part question. First of all, would it be smarter to try and push further, go for like the whole enchilada and say no prohibition of any kind of, drugs? I mean, that would be harder to get the states to ratify. Or you could do what I would call the Vegetable Drug Act and say no prohibition against plants of any kind.
I get that part. I mean, that would be all right. What I've heard is that if you just do even just cannabis, that's like a game changer.
It would be,
because, as you know, more people are going to get caught with pot than any other drug. I mean, just more people do it than coke or ecstasy or heroin or even the opiates. The legal or not. And because of that, and people will sell it because it's not that big a deal to sell it. It's not like it's just usually to friends, and it's just stuff you've got, and you know what I mean? Like we've all been there, done that, I'm sure, at some point in time. Not all of us, but there's a lot of us who have, and
And it has the least.
When the law
Mhm.
enforcement knows that you're low hanging fruit, all they've got to do is watch you.
Right.
And I don't mean watch like just me, I mean watch a neighborhood. And eventually, something's going to happen. Something will happen that will be illegal, even if it's just minor. And then that's when they get the right to do everything
Mhm.
and throw you in jail. And that's another thing that they were talking about. Like if you're white and you get stopped and you have some pot on you, chances are the police will say nothing because they're your first like person who's going to charge you
Mhm.
in the scheme of criminal justice here.
Mhm.
Because the policeman can say, I'll let you off. Like, how many times you've been speeding? They'll let you off, write you the ticket. Get what I'm
Mhm.
saying here?
Right.
Same thing. But we have found that it is a certain DNA that gets let out all the time
Right.
from the marijuana, the pot, and the other DNA does not.
Mhm.
So that's why I say that because then it puts them in the system,
Mhm. I think that
and then from there on in,
I
that's
think
it.
that answers my question because it, yeah, if you try and make it broader, it makes it too hard, and then you're going to have a lot of people asking, well, the people are going to be asking for the language of the amendment. They're going to want to know exactly what the amendment says, and you'll run into that obstacle of saying, well, the convention is where the actual language of the amendment has to be written. But if you keep it so simple that if all you're calling for is the repeal of any prohibition or the banning of any federal prohibition on cannabis, there's really no room for the language to be changed because it's so simple. It's just there will be no ban of or no there will be no federal prohibition on cannabis. Period.
Hmm.
I mean, it could literally be whatever that is, 10 words or whatever. Um, and then you could
Hmm.
just say, yeah, the convention. If we call a convention, it will be, it'll last an hour, and they'll bang the gavel, and then it's up to the states to ratify. Uh, as opposed to if it was more complicated and you tried to add in, mushrooms or whatever else, whatever other kind of plants. Even though it'd be nice to, just make it all plants. Yeah, it would be harder. And then you'd have
Well,
that
and then that
question
gets
of what's the actual language going to look like.
well, and we know that poppy, poppy is a plant,
Hmm. But I think opium
and
should
that
be legal, you know?
I don't necessarily think that it shouldn't. I just think that it's not a low hanging fruit.
Yeah, it's scarier
That's
to the prudes.
well, I mean, that's a real deal to do. I mean, it ain't just
Opium.
like
To
you
make
know
opium, I think it's pretty easy.
to smoke it is a little bit trickier. From everything I've seen people do, I and talk to them about it.
Uh-huh.
I mean, you got to be a little. It's not exactly like smoking pot, is what I've heard.
I don't know anything about it. I do
I
know
don't
that
know. That's
opium wasn't even known to be addictive for hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years before finally somebody in like the 1800s observed that, oh, once somebody starts using opium, they'll basically use it until they die. It it wasn't even thought of as
well.
addictive. Hello? Did you get disconnected? I heard a chime. Uh-oh. Think I lost Pagan Communist. Well, right when we were getting into juicy stuff. um Let me reconnect here. Oh, are you back?
Hello. Yeah,
Yep.
I don't know what happened.
I don't know.
See, so when I bring up all that empire stuff,
Yeah.
that was the opium wasn't addictive
Mhm.
for a long time, and opium isn't from China. It's from where it is now,
Yeah.
the Golden Triangle, and India. Okay, so the
Mhm.
English wanted tea,
Mhm.
and the Chinese wouldn't give it to them. So they got them opium,
Hmm.
and then they got tea.
Yeah,
So if
I
you,
think there's a case to be
yeah,
made for saying legalize all plants, but now that we've talked about it a little bit, I think it's pretty obvious that that would just
yeah.
muddy the waters in today's current climate and today's current, yeah, politics. That would just, it would make it much harder than it needs to be, and just keeping things simple, stick to
Well, and that's
cannabis.
and the right. And the thing of it is that if you get one amendment passed that way, or I mean, if you get an
Mm-hmm.
amendment to the Constitution, because that's what we would want, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
an Article 5 or whether it's
Congress
Congress proposing one and the states still, and you would still have to go and probably work on your state
to ratify.
represented
Mm-hmm.
legislators to ratify it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is. I mean, it's not going to be an easy thing,
No.
no matter what. But
But once it
with it,
happens the first time, it'll make people realize how doable it is, and then hopefully it can happen a lot more.
well, yeah, and if marijuana stops being prohibited federally, and our society does not crash and burn, and
Mm-hmm.
the and
Sky
what
doesn't fall.
some, yeah, whatever you, yeah, or the earth doesn't swallow us
Mm-hmm.
up, then perhaps people
Yeah, the rest
will
of the war
not
on
be
drugs will start to topple
right.
because then you will have a real excuse to defund the police, because literally the main thing that they're there for, busting potheads, is no longer
One
needed.
of two,
What's the other one?
prostitution.
Mm-hmm. That is the other one, and that should be the next one. I think. Yeah, I totally agree with you
That
on
should
that.
be legal. As you
Mm-hmm.
know, I want that to be legal. I would
Yeah.
like it to be the first, but I'm going to go on the easier road.
I think your point about once people see how the amendment process works, then yeah, then it'll be easier to have the. Then you can just talk about the issues. Like right now, we have to explain the process, and so using an issue that most people agree on. I mean, I don't know if it's 90% or 80% of the US population, I think, wants cannabis legalized federally. You know, it's an issue
I
we
think
don't.
it's like 80. It's
Mhm.
it's 80 because so many families have been,
Mhm.
you know,
Broken up.
touched by
Yeah.
that, and not just, and we were talking, how it's not just, and the war on drugs was not just against black people, it was against anybody who was an activist, and if
Mhm.
they could catch you for anything,
Mhm.
and how easy to plant marijuana on you,
Mhm.
because they had no way of testing back then,
Mhm.
up until even very recently, of how recently you've done
Mhm.
marijuana. So there was no testing. If it was found on you back in the day, I'm a boomer,
Mhm.
that they just assumed you were guilty
And
of
even if
smoking it.
even nowadays, if
Yes,
you have possession, I don't think you even have to test positive, right? Possession is still illegal, so they can still plant it on anybody.
hmm so we're just telling you, instead of trying to do all 50 states
Mhm.
to get marijuana legalized in every state, it's much easier to only have to do like 37.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean,
Think about it.
it's and yeah, because you're it's and if states that don't want it legal in their state still want to prohibit it in their state, they're free to do that. I believe in states' rights, but I don't
They
want
are.
big government getting in our business. That's the main thing.
And they've certainly seen that they can do that because
Mm-hmm.
they have restricted abortion rights as much as possible,
Mm-hmm.
which, of course, I mean, it's just a medical procedure
Mm-hmm.
that only women have. Wow.
That's another issue. That's a great hypothetical. I think now, when we were really when you and I were deep in the fight on Article 5, people kept talking about, oh, the Supreme Court will save us and we don't need to worry about amendments. But now now the Supreme Court is scary to people on that side. So, I mean, we can use that issue to scare people. What if they repeal Roe versus Wade? Then what are you going to do? You know, if they overturn
And they
Roe v.
don't
Wade,
even,
the
yeah.
only
And
option
they're
then would
already
be
looking,
to amend the
it's not,
Constitution.
it's not, they're saying it's not, you know, it's just a matter of when.
Mm-hmm.
It's not if. They will.
Mm-hmm.
They will, but you know, so let me tell you, don't be getting on the boomers. Who you
Mm-hmm.
want to be on is the silent generation
Mm-hmm.
because they're the ones in power
Mm-hmm. The
and they're
sneaky.
older than the boomers.
They're silent, but they're sneaky. You don't know about them because they're so quiet. They just do it all in the shadows.
Yep. And they have another look out front. Why? Because they even knew that the boomers would not accept them if they weren't at least somewhat progressive. And I'm talking about Nancy, and I'm talking about Chuck, and I'm talking about Joe. They're all the silent generation,
And you know
all the
what?
leaders.
And I mean, I guess it's trauma because like I just Googled because I think I knew this, but I wasn't really 100% sure. It says traditionalists are known as, quote, the silent generation because children of this era were expected to be seen and not heard. They're those who were born between 1927 and 1946, and they average from 75 to 80 years old in 2018. I guess it's also known as the traditionalists generation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the greatest generation
Was the one that fought World War
was
II. They were adults in World
born
War II.
born in
The
from
silent,
1901 to 1927.
right, the silent generation is the one who would have fought the Korean War.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
then there was the boomer generation that fought the Vietnam War. And then we can see, isn't it wonderful that America can talk about their generations by the wars they've fought?
Mm-hmm.
Aren't we so lucky?
Mm-hmm.
I am warred out, ladies and gentlemen,
Mm-hmm.
warred out. Why isn't America warred out? Why aren't you warred out? Why aren't we all just sick of war?
Yeah. I mean, and that's one, like, we shouldn't even have to pass an amendment on that one because it already says in the Constitution that Congress declares war. But we've been under the same, we've been fighting how many different wars now? At least 8, I think.
I've
Under,
heard 13. I've
yeah,
heard 13 total.
is that right? Yeah. Fighting
Yeah.
from a 20-year-old, a 20-year-old police action. So I don't even
Yeah.
I don't even know if an amendment could fix that problem because it's already in the Constitution. You just need a way to rein in the executive branch, and Congress doesn't want to do that because they're all bought. I guess the amendment to fix that problem would be the campaign finance
No.
amendment.
Or the other one, senators cannot, no one elected can own any stock
That's a good
in
one too.
anything.
But they still would get campaign finance donations from military
They
industrial.
would, but it would be a lot different from them because then,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's sort of like now.
Mm-hmm.
You'll take your money from anybody, but you know, if you don't have any skin in the game,
Mm-hmm.
your vote may not be as bought.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know, and that's what I have to say about
That would be another really good one.
about
I think that would be popular too. No federal elected legislators can own stock. Period. That's an amendment. I think you could get a large. I think you could get 2/3 or 3/4 of Americans to sign on for that. I don't know if the states would all go for it, but
The other thing that I said is there. What if you had an amendment where that America? It was an amendment
mm-hmm.
every 2 years. America's vote on the minimum wage.
Mm-hmm. That would be a good one.
I'm telling you, they'd be so scared. They'd be so
Yeah.
scared. I'm sure they'd say, well, that's not constitutional. I don't know why it wouldn't be constitutional. Nobody sets the minimum wage. There is no, when you look into it, nobody, I mean, the feds do, but
Mhm.
they just started doing it like one day. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like, I think it was under Roosevelt, right? He said, okay, we've got to have a minimum wage.
Mhm.
So, when we're trying to get out of this depression or whatever, that the government would pay for things like the conservation corps and all that stuff that they were
Mhm.
doing to get um, the economy going.
Mhm.
And so it was that they had to have a minimum wage because then people could then start getting loans again, which I know is a terrible thing. I understand about that,
Mhm.
but loans are part of what make the economy go. Did then, do now.
Mhm.
Okay, and I don't like capitalism any better than anybody else, but we got it, and that's how the economy works right now,
How about
and
a
that's how it worked
maximum
then.
wage?
You could
I'd
do that, a
I'd do an
maximum
amendment
wage.
for no one can make over $1 billion a year. There you go.
That would probably be unconstitutional.
How so?
You cannot limit. You can't limit it because it would be under the pursuit of happiness.
Okay. You may have convinced me there.
I mean, I think it'd be a really hard one because that's
Mhm.
one of the ones where when your rights come into somebody else's rights, it's like the smoking. The cigarette smoking one is the one I
Mhm.
always want to use. I'm not a cigarette smoker. Yes, I used to smoke because I'm a boomer.
Mhm.
I'm a boomer. Um, but and but that is sort of the thing is that I always felt it was interesting how that by making people to go outside, that was an infringement on their right. But it was said, well,
Mhm.
people can die from secondhand smoke, so that was more of an infringement
Mhm.
on their right. Do you see what I'm saying? Through no fault of their own, they could die of something that they're not
Right.
choosing to do.
Well, I think you could make an argument that someone making over $1 billion a year um, is infringing on other people's rights because it's hoarding too much resources. But
I mean, hey, I think it'd be a good argument. I don't know
yeah,
what precedents
I
are
know.
out
I,
there,
I
and
think it
there's
would be better
probably
just to
some.
have a high tax rate would be better. Just have a 70% tax rate
Yep.
on anything over 10 million or 100 million or whatever you want to set it at. But yeah, no, I hear you.
Are we still live?
We are, and we've gone
Oh,
long. We
okay.
started late because I
That's
was
okay.
late.
It's
So,
okay. I just didn't know because I'm
hmm
not. I've been in and out and stuff. No, normally we don't go this long, but we're just having a conversation about the Constitution of America, which should be like one of the most important things
hmm
to everyone. It's not, but it should be because it's what gives us the quality of life that we want, not the quality
hmm
of life we have. It's meant there to be something I mean, if anything, to me, some of the framers were not all for people having a lot of rights.
hmm
So I think their attitude was if you can take them, and I don't mean physically, like I'm going to have a revolution, but if you can take those rights, if you can wrestle that power from those that have it, by all means, we will give you a means.
hmm
Not an easy one, but a means. So that's what I've always thought.
yeah, I mean it's possible. It's not easy, but
And uh, and most amendments have started as a call for an Article 5 convention. We always want to let you know that, our audience, because that's a very important thing. You must never think that Article 5s are frivolous or funny or, unimportant. They are the reason that you get to elect the senator that you have the way you do, because that is not part of the Constitution. How you do it now was an amendment,
They
because
used to be
that
appointed
was
by the
unfair.
legislatures, by the state
Right.
legislatures. Yep.
But I'm just saying, the people felt that was not the proper way to do it, because they were supposed to be voted by the people to represent them. So at one time, the people were saying, we are going to wrestle power from you. And they did, from the state legislators. So you can wrestle power. It's not easy. And I'm not going to tell you it is. And I'm old and I may not win a battle. I'm hoping before I die I win a battle, but I may not. But that is not going to stop me from fighting or thinking that I should fight. Because it'll just make it better for those that are left. And that's really what democracy is supposed to be about.
You're still in the game.
I'm still in the
Main
game.
thing, yep. Well, it's been fun. I guess we're wrapping it up, right?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Well, until next
You
time.
all have a good week. That's right.
You too.
And keep the Article 5 alive.
Absolutely. Bye.
Bye.